When Dr. Aisha Monroe accepted the position of school director in a suburban town in Ohio, she knew the job would be challenging, but she didn't expect resistance so quickly. The school had a long history, traditional leadership, and unspoken rules about who usually held power. As the first black woman to lead the institution, Monroe walked into her new role with confidence, strong credentials, and a clear vision for change. Still, from her very first day, she sensed tension in the air. Students whispered in hallways, teachers watched her carefully, and a few staff members remained distant. Among them was Mr. Carter, a senior teacher who had worked at the school for over 20 years. He was popular with certain students and parents, loud in meetings, and used to getting his way. Almost immediately, he began questioning Monroe's decisions, sometimes openly, sometimes through sarcasm and jokes that made others uncomfortable. During her first school assembly, Mr. Carter interrupted her speech with a comment that drew laughter from a small group of students. He joked about new leadership styles, and implied that the school was becoming too strict. Dr. Monroe paused, smiled calmly, and continued speaking without responding. But the message was clear. He was testing her authority. Over the next few weeks, the bullying grew. Anonymous posts appeared on social media questioning her qualifications. Rumors spread that she was hired only to fill a quota. Some students began acting out, encouraged by the idea that the director could be disrespected without consequences. Teachers noticed the shift, but many stayed silent, afraid of conflict or retaliation. Despite everything, Monroe did not react emotionally. Each morning, she arrived early, greeting students by name and listening to their concerns. She visited classrooms, observed teaching methods, and spoke privately with counselors and support staff. Slowly, students began trusting her. They shared stories about unfair discipline, ignored complaints, and favoritism that had gone on for years. Dr. Monroe took notes. She reviewed attendance records, disciplinary reports, and staff evaluations. Patterns emerged, patterns that pointed back to Mr. Carter and a few others who abused their influence. Still, she said nothing publicly. To those watching closely, it almost seemed like she was doing nothing at all. But behind closed doors, she was preparing. She understood something important. Reacting too soon would only give the bully more power. Instead, she chose patience, facts, and strategy. She believed leadership wasn't about shouting the loudest, it was about knowing when to speak and when to listen. By the end of her first month, the school felt divided. Some believed the rumors, others quietly hoped Monroe would stand up for herself. No one knew what she was planning. What they didn't realize was that every insult, every joke, and every act of disrespect was being carefully documented. And when the time came, Aisha Monroe would respond. Not with anger, but with a move so strong that it would change the school forever. The turning point came sooner than anyone expected. A monthly school board meeting was scheduled, and most teachers assumed it would be routine. Parents filled the room, students sat quietly in the back, and Mr. Carter arrived with his usual confidence, smiling and chatting as if nothing could touch him. Dr. Aisha Monroe entered last, carrying a slim folder and wearing the same calm expression she always did. When it was her turn to speak, the room grew quiet. Instead of starting with opinions or emotions, she began with facts. She projected attendance data, disciplinary records, and academic results from the past 5 years. The numbers told a troubling story: declining performance, repeated complaints, and unresolved reports. Then she connected the dots, showing how certain classrooms and decisions were linked to the same names again and again. Gasps filled the room as emails appeared on the screen. They showed unprofessional language, favoritism, and attempts to undermine leadership. Dr. Monroe never raised her voice. She spoke slowly, clearly, and with respect. She explained how bullying, especially from those in power, created fear, damaged student confidence, and hurt the entire school culture. Mr. Carter tried to interrupt, but the board chair stopped him. For the first time, he had no control of the room. Next, Monroe shared student testimonies, anonymous but powerful. They spoke of being mocked, ignored, or punished unfairly. Parents shifted in their seats. Teachers looked down, realizing how much had been hidden for years. The silence was heavy, and every word carried weight. When she finished, Drive, Monroe closed her folder and said one final thing: leadership should protect, not intimidate. The room remained quiet as the board asked her questions. She answered each one with evidence and clarity. There was no anger in her tone, only purpose. After a brief private discussion, the board returned with a decision. An investigation would begin immediately. Mr. Carter was placed on administrative leave, and new policies against bullying and abuse of authority were approved on the spot. Training programs, anonymous reporting systems, and student leadership councils were announced. Changes Drive, Monroe had already planned. The reaction was instant. Students whispered in amazement. Some teachers stood and applauded. Parents nodded with relief. The bully, once so loud, left the room in silence. In the weeks that followed, the school transformed. Students felt safer speaking up. Teachers worked with renewed respect. The online rumors disappeared, replaced by messages of support. Dr. Monroe continued her work without celebration or pride. For her, the goal was never revenge, it was justice and progress. Her calm strength became a lesson more powerful than any rulebook. Without shouting, without insults, she had silenced the bully and united the school. And from that day forward, Drive, Aisha Monroe was no longer just the new director, she was the leader. The weeks following the board meeting brought a sense of renewal to the school. The halls, once tense with whispers and uncertainty, now hummed with quiet determination. Students moved with confidence, teachers collaborated more openly, and a culture of respect began taking root. Dr. Aisha Monroe continued her work with the same calm demeanor, but her presence now carried the authority of someone who had proven not only her competence but her integrity. Mr. Carter's absence was felt immediately. The students who had once been influenced by his ridicule began to realize the weight of their own actions. Several approached Drive, Monroe privately, apologizing for their behavior, admitting that they had joined in the bullying out of fear or peer pressure. She listened to each student, acknowledging their courage, and used these moments to teach accountability and empathy. She encouraged restorative practices, where students would take responsibility for their actions and work to repair the harm they had caused. Teachers who had remained silent during Mr. Carter's reign of intimidation now found their voices. Staff meetings transformed from tense, guarded discussions into productive brainstorming sessions. Dr. Monroe introduced professional development programs focused on leadership, communication, and inclusivity. Slowly, a sense of unity began to replace the division that had once defined the school. One particularly memorable day, the student council requested a meeting with Dr. Monroe. They presented ideas for new clubs, mentorship programs, and community outreach projects. She listened intently, providing guidance without imposing her authority unnecessarily. Her support for student initiatives became a model for leadership, showing that power is most effective when it empowers others rather than controls them. Word of the transformation spread beyond the school. Parents noticed the change in their children's attitudes and confidence. Local news outlets highlighted the school's improved environment and praised the director's leadership. Dr. Monroe, however, remained humble. She often reminded her staff and students that success wasn't about accolades or recognition. It was about fostering an environment where everyone felt safe, valued, and heard. Despite the positive changes, Drive, Monroe remained vigilant. She continued monitoring for signs of misconduct or unfair treatment, ensuring that the lessons learned from Mr. Carter's behavior would not be forgotten. Policies were revisited regularly, and student feedback was prioritized in every decision. She understood that lasting change required consistent effort, not a single victory. The most profound moment came at the end of year assembly. Students, teachers, and parents gathered to celebrate achievements, and Dr. Monroe was invited to speak. She reflected not only on the school's accomplishments but also on the journey they had all taken together. Without naming names or highlighting past conflicts, she emphasized respect, empathy, and the power of integrity. As she spoke, the room was silent in admiration, a stark contrast to the whispers of doubt that had greeted her months earlier. By the time the assembly ended, it was clear that Dr. Aisha Monroe had done more than just silence a bully. She had transformed the entire school culture. Her leadership had set a new standard, one that valued fairness, courage, and dignity above all else. Students left the auditorium inspired, teachers left motivated, and the school itself seemed to breathe a little easier. In the end, Drive, Monroe had not only proven her capability but had shown that true leadership is measured not by power wielded, but by the respect earned and the positive change inspired.